Hi, thanks for joining the breakdown where we focus on evidence, reasoned arguments, and considering new ideas with an open mind. My name is James Sayer and I'm your host. Tonight, our topic, the Portland protests. So let's get into it. It's been 91 days of protests since the beginning of protests in Portland after the killing of George Floyd. They've varied widely in intensity, initially starting as more peaceful protests with thousands and thousands of people, then over time growing smaller, but becoming a little more violent and dangerous as police have stepped up on many occasions their repressive tactics, oftentimes overreacting and using excessive force against mostly peaceful protesters. But protesters, too, at times, overstepping their bounds, actually quite often, doing things they shouldn't be doing, crimes, destroying property, throwing things at police officers, assaulting them with bags of urine and feces and throwing rocks and pointing lasers at them. Definitely, the peaceful protests are protected in our country. They're sacred. They should be respected for anyone of any stripe, of any belief. They should be protected. But not violent protests, not destruction of private property, not assaulting police officers or assaulting people that you disagree with politically, that you may feel are racist or are being unfair and that you're angry with. But resulting in violence is not justified. It cannot be tolerated. And protesters, you have to do a better job of policing your ranks, making sure that your folks are not getting involved in violent actions against police. It makes the left and it makes the protest movement against racism and against police brutality. It makes you look bad. It makes you look like you're out of control and you do not have the restraint or wisdom to govern. So think before you act. Okay. From most reports, widely, most protesters in Portland, as in elsewhere, are peaceful, but not all. And especially at night in Portland, these protests devolve into violence. Largely peaceful during the day, they become more violent at night with rioting between them and the police. Numerous locations within Portland that the riots and protests have taken place at city and state government buildings, but also federal buildings as well. They've moved the protests around all over Portland, changing locations. When the federal government laid kind of a heavy hand on when Trump brought in federal officers to deal with the protesters, many felt that they used that the federal officers used excessive force. Many claims have also been made against Portland police using excessive force, deploying tear gas and concussion weapons and different pepper spray and these different rubber bullets against peaceful protesters. We've also seen in numerous other locations across the country, including Portland, where police have at times seemed to target media and protesters indiscriminately. And this has been caught on tape on numerous occasions and numerous instances where we have police officers giving one account and video account giving a very, very different account. So that makes the police look bad. So police, if you want us to trust you, if you want us to take your word for it like we used to back in the old days, even though we obviously now shouldn't have, if you want us to believe you again, you've got to tell the truth, okay? Your truth has to match the truth on video, and video is not going away. People have cell phones. Now you've got your camera that you're going to have to carry around everywhere, and that's an improvement. And there have been a lot of improvements, you see, that there have been a lot of changes. Departments that were dragging their feet on wearing body cameras are wearing body cameras now. Officers are getting fired that weren't getting fired before. Not as many as should be, but more than before. Officers being prosecuted for shooting black people that never would have been prosecuted in the past. So differences there have been things that have been improved, that the protests have drawn attention to. Roger Goodell with the NFL admitted he was wrong. Against against the people like Colin Kaepernick and everyone else, taking a knee against, during the national anthem, against police brutality. Finally, people are starting to see that Colin was right. He was right all along. There could be no better justification for Colin Kaepernick. And if anybody deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, it's that man. That man is a profile in courage. That is a man of true character. He sacrificed his NFL career. It is over, pretty much. It's not looking good. He sacrificed his career to do the right thing. He gave it up. How many people would actually do that? He had it made. He was set. He was set with a professional career, and he gave it up to do what his conscience told him what was right to do. And he did it non-violently, folks. He did it non-violently like Martin Luther King did it. He did it non-violently like Noam Chomsky has done it. He did it non-violently like Gandhi has done it. Now, these are people that have made real and lasting change, serious contributions to real systemic change in our society, and they've done it through nonviolence. Now, if you think of all the violent movements, all the violent protest movements, or the radical movements, very rarely do they result in any lasting change. And here's the problem with radical behavior, whether that be radical on the left or right, which we would call reactionary, is that these groups perform a very important service to society in that they're small fringe groups. They do not represent the majority of people in society or viewpoints in society, but they can draw attention to concerns and interests that the middle, that the center of society is not aware of. They can draw attention to police injustice. Like, black people can bring attention to that because white people aren't aware of it because they don't experience it. But people who do, protesters, right, who realize this is wrong and are bringing it to the fore, have done us a serious service in asserting their rage against this injustice. And the Portland protesters have kept up the fight, and they deserve credit for that. Absolutely. They are doing their part to keep people aware that this isn't over. Jacob Blake was just shot just last week 7 times. And the jury's out on all of that. We should never jump to conclusions about any of these types of instances, even when we have video footage, because that doesn't always have all the context. But this is coming. There's always more to the picture than we know from news bites. But this is all happening after so many years of oppression and brutality against the black community that cannot be denied. And it's coming on the heels of so many different videos of police overreacting to say the least against someone who is a minor threat, if no threat at all, and then killing someone with no real justification. It's just happened far too many times. And there is no corresponding set of videos of this happening to white people, to white men. Why? Where are those videos? They're not there. They don't exist. If they did, we would have seen them already. It has to end. It has to stop. The protesters are right, but you have to draw the line. You have to know when to stop yourself. You have to exert self-control. All right. The Constitution protects your right to peaceful protesting, lawful protesting, okay? Nonviolent protesting. It does not protect, you do not have a right to destroy somebody's storefront. You do not have a right to trash City Hall. You do not have a right to threaten people that you disagree with politically, or to brawl with people in the street with which you disagree with politically. You don't have a protected right for any of that. Now, Portland's given a break to a lot of the protesters that are breaking minor laws and that are perhaps involved in minor acts of destruction. They're giving a pass to those folks because they want to focus on the more serious criminals, which I think is a wise decision. Now, this is Portland, and Portland has a proud history and a tradition of protesting going back to the 1850s. In the last decade, it's gotten crazy, like crazy intense, greater intensity, greater frequency, and larger numbers of protesters. Portland is a left-wing bastion, absolutely. And but also you also have many right-wing groups that like to from the surrounding areas that like to come in and protest as well. And when these groups get together, right-wing and left-wing, they don't get along. There's almost always fights. You got folks like Antifa or other left-wing groups there mixing it up with right-wing groups, and who's instigating who, that's a debate I'm not going to get into. Because in my opinion, from what I see, there's instigation on both sides, left and right, far left and far right. All right. When you got the Proud Boys, you got the Boogaloo people, or anybody else that goes there and they go with weapons and they're shouting and yelling at each other and saying incendiary, insightful things, they're not going there to work things out. They're not going there, to come to terms with the other side. They're coming there to get in a fight. They're coming in there to jack people up, and they're coming in there to it's political theater. It's a political statement. They're not going to change it. Nobody's interested. Nobody, these very few, I would say nobody, but very few people at these violent protests, particularly the ones between, like we had last week, between the right-wing protesters in downtown Portland and the left-wing protesters. That was just political theater. That was an opportunity for people to just go at each other. Right? They accomplished absolutely nothing besides looking like jerks, looking like fools on both sides. All right. And just, making each other hate each other even more. All right. The right wing people look like fools. The left wing people look like fools. All right. It's not working. It's not solving anything. Now, there's something to be said for standing up for what you believe. And there's also something to be said for putting up a fight. Right, for what you believe. And if somebody's trying to hurt you, you're absolutely obligated to fight. You go to a protest and somebody tries to hurt you, yeah, you should fight. You should fight back. And if you need to protect yourself, you bring what you need to protect yourself. I don't have a problem with that. That's reasonable. Okay? But that doesn't give you a right to incite violence. Okay? And you know if you're doing it or not. Right? You can talk to people respectfully. You don't have to throw stuff at them. You don't have to yell at them. You could actually, imagine this. Imagine speaking to someone you disagreed with intensely, but imagine that you spoke to them with respect. Imagine if you actually listened to them. Maybe you didn't agree with them, but you were like, let me just hear them out. Let me just really listen and see, maybe they got a point. Maybe I don't agree with him. Maybe I think he's racist. Maybe I think he's an idiot. But, maybe there's something I'm not familiar with in this person's experience. Let me hear where they're coming from. Even if I don't agree, maybe I get some idea of why they feel this way. And same for the right. You think these people are commies who hate their country and they want to destroy America and they want to create a nanny state and you don't understand, right? And you just think these people, if they don't love America, you should get out of the country. Well, that's what you think about what they think. But I know a lot of, pretty far left people, and that's not what they think. That's not an accurate description of what they actually think. And now it may look like that to you from a distance. And you might, that might be understandable why you would see that. You see somebody burning a flag on TV, right? That is infuriating, right? And most people don't like to see that. Especially most Americans don't like seeing the American flag burn. It is offensive, right? So lefties, if you're listening, cut it out. That doesn't work. You're making a statement. It's only playing to the furthest of the left. Everyone else hates it. It does not win you any supporters. It makes you look like you hate America, even though I know a lot of you don't. You're trying to make a political statement, right? But most Americans don't get that. They don't get it, and they don't like it. They just don't like seeing their flag burn. And why would they, right? Come up with something else. Come up with something else, okay? Something that's going to convince people, not repulse them or detest them. So where am I getting with all this? Obviously, I'm dissatisfied. I'm dissatisfied with how the police have behaved, right? I'm dissatisfied with how the left has behaved. They resorted to violence when they should have kept it peaceful, all right? The cops have messed up, all right? They're people. They're imperfect people with a very difficult job. They struggle with racism like we all do, okay? We're all guilty of it. We've all committed racism. We think it in our minds, and occasionally we act in racist ways. Right? It's something that we all have done, and it's something that we all must struggle with. This is the truth. The struggle is never over. Every day, you have to police your thoughts and your actions. Now, you have a right to think what it is you want to think, and there's a limit to how much you can control what you think. There are thoughts that are just going to come into your head based on whatever stimulus or whatever is happening. that are not fully within your control. You cannot be held accountable for what pops in your head. You are accountable, however, for your actions. Your actions you do answer for. Your actions determine what kind of person you are, whether you're a moral person, whether you're a wise and just person, or whether you're a fool or a scoundrel. Your actions determine who it is you truly are. So think about what it is you're doing before you actually do it. Instead of acting like a fool who has no self-control and no ability at strategic thinking, think about what is this going to benefit anyone if I'm going to throw this rock at somebody, at this policeman, at this, this right-wing protester, or if I'm going to bust this guy this left-wing guy in the head with a bat, or shoot this guy with a paintball gun. This is solving nothing. Nobody's backing down. Far left and far right guys, they're not going to back down. They believe hardcore in what they believe. Okay, fine. But do it in a legal way. Do it in a legal way. All right? Follow the laws. Respect the laws. Respect the Constitution. Okay? You all claim, well, I'll say you all, that's not true for you all. Okay? But most people claim to respect the Constitution. If you respect the Constitution, you'll respect someone's constitutional rights to speak their mind. Whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, it's irrelevant. Their right to speak their mind without fear of violence. That is a fundamental right of living in this country. Even if it's racist or sexist or stupid or whatever, a person has a right to say these things. They don't have a right to harass people. Harassment's different. When someone's aggressively targeting someone with hateful, racist, or sexist speech, that's harassment, that's illegal. You can be prosecuted for that. But for someone just speaking their mind, that is a fundamental right that all Americans have, and it's sacred, and it's not going anywhere. So accept it, embrace it, stop trying to resort to violence at protests to shut people up. You don't like the fact that somebody says something racist. Fine. Don't resort to violence. Resort to persuasion, well-reasoned argument, given with compassion and understanding. Okay? Do that. If you don't like the way some lefty, their feelings, right-wing people, look at it this way. If you don't like their political philosophy, that's fine, but listen to them. Hear where they're coming from. Don't just jump to the conclusion that they hate America, because that's nonsense. Very, very few left-wing people hate America. There are a few. There's probably like 5, okay? Most left-wing people are just concerned with systemic problems that fall upon the poor and minorities mostly. And, we've seen that, typically the Republican Party, especially as of late, tends to support the more established white people, right? That, the conservative ideology typically does not like change. All right. Now I'm not referring to Republicans as conservative, because they've given up that mantle some time ago when they gave up any attempt at fiscal restraint. They have given up that a long time ago. They've given up any hope of responsible governance, which used to be a claim of theirs. They have relinquished that mantle. So Republicans are Republicans. They are the party of Trump. They have no platform because they are indeed the party of Trump. So that is their position, okay, which I do not agree with. All right? But if you're going to try and change somebody's mind, left-wing people, you want to change a right-wing person's mind, it's not going to be through attacking them and yelling at them and insulting them. You must first listen to them, hear where they're coming from, understand how they feel. What are their concerns? What are their issues? What is it that's most important that matters to you? Think about those things and what could be done to help them from your position. What type of a solution, what type of left-wing solution could you create that would address their concerns and issues in a meaningful way? Right? You might be able to find an area of compromise, but that's never going to happen. You're never going to have that as long as you're yelling and shouting at each other. Right? And the right-wing people, as long as you think that left-wing people are just God haters and want to murder babies, and this is a super simplistic view of your political opposition, which is nonsense, you're never going to understand why there are so many people that are unhappy with the Trump administration, why there are so many people that are unhappy about the way police have behaved in recent years. Why are so many people unhappy about the way like our country is going, whether it be with education or the climate, or the COVID-19 crisis, that there are some people that just can't fathom why you would criticize the United States president, even if he's doing arguably an incredibly poor job. Now, typically, the party in power is, pretty loyal to their president. And whoever the president is in power, that party is loyal to them, right? So that's to be expected. But you have to be able to get through to people, right? We all have our walls up. We try and block people out. We want to be able to believe what we believe without having our comfortable beliefs challenged, but that doesn't work. You're not a credible analyst. You're not a credible broker. You're not a credible person to sit at the table of developing solutions in society if you're not willing to change your beliefs when you're confronted with new information. You have to have the decency, the intellectual integrity, and the moral character to be willing to say I was wrong. I had it wrong. I had incomplete information. I didn't know everything I needed to know. Now that I know no more, I'm changing my mind. I'm taking a new position based on this new information. We all should be able to do that. Left, right, middle, anybody. We've got to be able to look at the evidence honestly and objectively and be able to own up to the fact when our side does wrong. All right? When our protesters use violence, it's wrong. When their protesters use violence, it's wrong. And that there's no exception to that. When the police use violence excessively, it's wrong. When they fire on, innocent protesters, or when they use, rubber bullets against the media indiscriminately, when they react with excessive violence and they shoot someone, they shouldn't shoot. They don't need to shoot. These are the things that must change, right? These are the things that we have to work to change. We have to come to common ground. We have to negotiate, all right? And if you want serious police reform, all right, there were two bills that were submitted. One was passed in the House by the Democrats, which has teeth. And if you want police reform, that's the bill that you're going to support. The one that was put forth by Tim Scott in the Senate, the black Republican senator in the Senate from South Carolina, that bill has virtually no teeth. It's pretty much an optional. These are a bunch of, there are some good ideas in this bill, and we've talked about this on our previous podcast, but it has no teeth. Really, very little would be required of police to change it all. That's not the case with the Democratic bill. It would force police, in many instances, police departments, to change their behavior. So there's going to have to be a lot of experimentation across the country, different places. They're going to need to try different things. Different cities, different localities are going to have different policing needs. The defund police slogan is widely unpopular within the United States. 538 analyzed a bunch of different polls and averaged it out. There's about a 58% of Americans of voting age are against the defund the police concept. They do not like the idea of defunding police, of abolishing police. Now, there is some support, according to one poll, I believe it's by Gallup, that up to 76% of respondents said that they supported the reallocation of some funding from police to social service organizations, like to deal with homelessness, drug addiction, and deal with issues of a nonviolent nature, right? So there is support. 76% of Americans support some reallocation. Okay, but it's all about the wording. Okay? When you change the questioning, of these polling questions to focus more on what the effects would be on the police, those numbers go on the police force, those numbers will go down. So it really depends on how you ask the question, but ultimately there's very little support publicly for serious defunding of police departments, and very, very, very little desire at all for defunding or abolishing the police whatsoever. Reallocation, fine, okay, reallocation of some funding, and there have been many concessions from numerous cities, from Los Angeles, New York, Portland, Seattle, numerous other places at DC, that have agreed to some type of partial defunding of their police departments and reallocating that funding to different social service groups to deal with different issues like homelessness or drug and alcohol abuse or other problems, right? And trying to maybe get like therapists or nurses to go to some of these, deal with some of these problems, like, you know, social workers to do these types of calls. Here's a problem though. A lot of the different ideas that have been put forward, the scenarios where police may not be needed, where the situation may not require someone who knows how to use force, right? They're saying, well, there's instances of homelessness where you don't need police. There's instances of, you know, drug addiction where you don't need police. There's instances of domestic disputes where you don't need police. And I'm thinking about this. I'm like, hold on a minute. These sound like all great opportunities for something to go horribly wrong, right? It's well established and that some of the most dangerous situations are domestic disputes. So you may think that can be resolved nonviolently, but those can turn incredibly violently very, very quickly. The idea that you're going to respond to a domestic disturbance, a domestic dispute, a heated fight between a husband and wife or partner or whatever, when those things very often do turn to violence, and you're not going to have someone who knows how to use force and is willing to use it if necessary, that's a recipe for disaster. Just like dealing with certain drug addicts can be very dangerous, or certain homeless people, or mentally ill people, right? These people deserve our compassion because they're human, and they're entitled to dignity and respect. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the poor. I'm talking about drug addicts, the homeless, the disenfranchised, the weak. They should be treated better. Our society has not done a very good job of looking out for the weak. Great at looking out for the winners, right? We see them everywhere, celebrated and lavished with praise and wealth. But we have not done. We don't even take good care of our veterans. All right, we just don't. We haven't made it a priority. We have not been willing to pay the money that it takes and to make the changes and reforms that need to be made to make it right. Okay, that's why protesters are making a fuss about black people getting shot, and they're not letting up in Portland because they're sick of it, and they're right to be sick of it, and they're right to take a stand, and I'm proud of them. But they've gone too far. You guys got to draw it back. You got to grow up, all of you. Okay, if you want to make a difference, stop screwing around. Act like a grown-up who knows how to behave and knows how to get stuff done, and not just throwing a bunch of crap around like a bunch of monkeys who don't know what they're doing. Okay? Get it together. If you want to be taken seriously, you have to behave seriously. And that involves no violence. Okay? The only violence that's ever justifiable is that which is in self-defense or the defense of others. Okay? When Antifa has at times, and left-wing protesters have at times stepped in to protect people from right-wing violence. Now, I support that. Anytime someone steps in to defend others, defend the weak, I support that. All right? Anytime someone, right or left, steps in to silence someone else with violence, I'm against that. There is no excuse for that. People must have a right to speak their minds freely and to believe what they believe, even if it's disgusting to you. That is part of the beauty of our country, is you have a right to believe and say what it is you think. And if you really, really don't like that, maybe you should leave. Maybe you should live somewhere else. Maybe you should live in another country that has not enshrined the First Amendment, right? The right to free speech, right? The right to protest, to peaceful protest, right? If you're not okay with that, there are plenty of other countries for you. Perhaps you would be happier going to live in a different country. And I'm talking to right-wingers and left-wingers here. If you think that somehow, like, someone doesn't have a right to speak their mind, and that shouldn't be protected, that there are instances, I mean, there are instances, all right, there's always exceptions, right? There's exceptions like, don't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? Don't commit fraud, right? Don't tell a lie that costs people like money, right? Don't lie to them, right? And commit fraud, because that's against the law. It's dishonest. It's a violation of the social contract. You're claiming one thing, right? You're presenting this is a miracle cure. Look at all this evidence. Use this and it's going to save you, and you spend the money and it's garbage, and your claims were patently false. They weren't just wrong, they were deceptive. And you prove it, you committed fraud, you go to jail, you pay a heavy fine. That's right, and that's fair, right? Somebody has a right to just get it wrong. We've all had dumb opinions. We've all thought stupid things at one point, right? We've all said and done stupid things at one point. I have, more times than I can remember. And I know you have too. And that's the thing that's so hard to take sometimes, is other people's outrage, whether it's left or right, that they're shouting down all the time. You're not a real American. You don't have a right to be like this. You don't have a right to believe that. You're sick. I think most of us are really tired of that. We're tired of hearing it from everybody. It's just played out. You all look like fools. It's time to evolve past this. Okay? There's been this weird media thing we've had with cable news and now with social media where we just go bonkers and we don't know how to handle it. Right? And we've got to get ourselves under control here. We have to evolve. We have to catch up with our technology and be able to behave responsibly. You know, just like all the weapons we have in this country, the hundreds of millions of weapons, those aren't going anywhere. We're not going to be able to get those off the street. Maybe some, but not most of them. It's not going to happen. So how do we live with that? How do we come to terms with that? Right? How do we come to terms with the reality of the things that we have to live with and the things that we have to change? Right? And the very different opinions we have about things. We have to be more respectful of each other, or we'll never find these solutions. As long as we're just yelling across, the street at each other, throwing stuff at each other, we're never getting anywhere. But if we have a dialogue, if we respect each other, we could learn from each other. I can learn from anybody if I listen to you, whether you're right or left or anywhere. I can hear where you're coming from, and so can you. We can all listen to each other, even if we don't agree. Give each other some thought. Even if we continue to disagree after talking it out, at least they'll know you listened. At least they'll know you were a human who cared and was honorable enough to stand there and listen to you and give you respect and consideration. And they'll know in their heart that you're not a bad person, that you don't hate America, that you want to make America a better place. And that little by little will bring us all together. That's something we all have to insist on ourselves. That we start getting better at this, treating each other with respect, right? Not jumping to conclusions. Police not jumping to conclusions and firing off too soon, right? And instead of some guy getting away, trying to stop him from getting away and shooting him back, let him go. Get him tomorrow, Or use a lethal approach, right? Just because you're in a black neighborhood doesn't mean you're in danger, all right? Maybe you're not used to being in a black neighborhood because blacks in this country are a minority, 13 or 14% of the population. That's not a big group of people. So, yeah, most white people aren't used to being around black people all the time. It's different for them. They're not used to it. They're not used to black culture. They're not used to black neighborhoods, right? And there's been, a culture of racism. I don't know, you might have noticed it. It's existed in this country for a little while, and it's been perpetuated for a very long time. Not just in history books, but in media and in TV and movies. We've all seen it. The stereotypes. It's time to move past it. It's time to demand more from the police. All right. While also understanding they have an incredibly difficult job to do. It's true. They do. It is a very, very tough job. A very tough and important job. And they need the resources to be able to do it. They need to be able to have the money and the training, the proper training, obviously better training than they've had. And maybe we need a better type of officer. Maybe what we really need to do is create a new concept of what a proper police officer actually is, right? The different makeup. Maybe not so quite as eager to use force. Maybe a little bit smarter, right? Maybe a little bit better educated. Maybe a little more well-rounded, better trained, right? We can make these changes. We can make institutional changes where there's more accountability, where people answer for things, right? Where officers that used to get off for offenses because they were protected by the police union, protected by their lawyers, that those protections will no longer exist. Not in the current way that they do. Where qualified immunity very likely could be dismantled. And if the Democrat bill ever passes, that would be the case. That's one of the provisions of the Democrat reform bill, is that would end qualified immunity, which is where you basically can't prosecute a police officer for doing his job. Even you can't prosecute him for committing a crime or like harming you, right? Because he was in the line of duty. He was doing it in the line of duty. So often they're protected by what's called qualified immunity. Well, that could very well be going away. But first, for that to happen, for meaningful police reform to happen, you've got to get rid of the Republicans from the Senate and from the White House. As long as you have Republicans in the Senate and the White House, you will not get a serious reform bill passed. Republicans have never been serious about police reform. They're not serious about it now, and it's evidence from the bill that they proposed. There's very little coercion, and there's very little that would actually require the police to change. And the Democrat bill is not perfect, but it is far superior. And it is a very good start. But the only way that's ever going to get into law is if Trump loses the election in November and the Republicans are voted out of the Senate in November. That is the only way serious, meaningful national police reform can take place, is if you elect Joe Biden and you elect the Democrats to the Senate in 2020. That's what you need to do. Now, like I said before, it's all about talking to each other with respect and listening to each other, right? Protesting is sacred and important, and you should do it. You should do it. Portland protesters, keep it up. Don't let it go. Don't let people forget, because that's what people do, right? They're mad now. They've been mad for a while about what happened to George Floyd and what's happened to all the other black men and black people, Breonna Taylor, and all the other black and even Latino folks that have been abused by police, right? And all the other people, of any color that have been harmed by police brutality. It must end. It's unacceptable. And it has to stop. All right? We have to get this done. But it's not going to happen by acting lawless. It's not going to happen by burning and looting and vandalizing, that makes you look bad. That plays into Trump's hands. He wants a law and order campaign. He wants to scare everyone and to make everyone think that you are not safe unless he is president. And protesters going crazy and burning stuff plays right into his hands. So don't do it. Think. Be strategic. Don't let your rage overcome your reason. Now, here's the other thing. We're talking about protesters getting out of hand, but here's another fact. A lot of these people resorting to violence aren't even real protesters. A lot of these people, now this is according to the Center for the International Strategic and International Studies, according to Seth Jones, who did some research on this, and he spoke to a number of law enforcement and intelligence officials. And according to his research, it appears that the bulk of people resorting to violence at these protests are not protesters themselves, but they're opportunistic criminals. All right? Opportunistic criminals that are taking advantage of the situation. And this is always the case in any protest movement, no matter how peaceful, that there's always going to be people within that crowd that seek to take advantage of it, that seek to pickpocket, or they seek to steal, they seek to destroy something, they want to loot, they want to lash out. There's always those folks, okay? Don't go along with them. Don't be a part of them. Separate yourself from them. Do not let yourself be influenced by instigators. What I mean by instigators, there's three types. One's the left-wing instigator who wants to do good, but he's doing it the wrong way and he's going too far and resorting to violence and destruction of property. Don't do that. There's the right-wing instigator. Right? We've heard a number of stories about these from across the country, whether it's Proud Boys or Boogaloo Boys or other groups, going places and trying to instigate fights and violence with left-wing protesters. Don't respond to it. Don't give in to it. Don't play into it. That's what they want. The right wants you to overreact so they can point to how lawless and out of control you are. Right? That's exactly what they do. And that's exactly what Trump is doing and what Fox News is doing. Every time you burn a building, every time you spray paint something, every time you go off, on a riot against the police, that stuff is, they focus in on that and act like that's all there is. Portland's a great city. I actually live just outside of it, and I go to Portland all the time, and I have no problems there at all. Right? And except for certain, relatively small sections of the city, you wouldn't even know any of this is going on. It's not a hellscape, and it really only gets, really bad most of the time at night and only in certain limited areas. So it's really not like it's being portrayed. Now it's a problem. It's a serious problem. And there are residents that are sick and tired of it. And there are businesses that are sick and tired of it. And this violence, this destruction of property, it's unfair to the citizens of Portland. It's unfair to the business owners of Portland. At some point, they're going to get tired of it. Okay? Don't overplay your hand, protesters. Think. Okay? You've got to know when to pull back. Okay? You've got to know when to say, we've made our point. We got everybody's attention. Okay? And we're going to keep everybody's attention because we're not going to let up. We're going to keep showing up every day. And we're going to protest. We're going to make noise. We're going to be difficult. We're not going to shut up until we get everything we want. Right on. Stick with that, but keep it peaceful. All right? Stop resorting to violence. Stop setting fires. Stop throwing rocks. Stop pointing lasers and trying to blind police. Okay? I know that's not most of you. I know that's a small number of you, but that small number makes you look bad. So the rest of you, police your group. You want the police to police themselves? That's fair. They should. But protesters, you're going to have to police yourselves too. You're going to have to police yourselves too. Kick them out. People want to resort to violence? Get them out. Don't be a part of the group. They can't be a part of yours. Don't stay with them. Don't stay near them. You see people causing trouble? Get away from them. Don't be a part of them. Okay? That's your responsibility. So, I've said a lot today. I've rambled quite a bit. I hope it's given you something to think about. And I hope that you get from this discussion that I have great respect for America and for American people, regardless of what your beliefs are. Right? I really do believe that most people are basically good. Now, we all got problems, and we're all capable of unspeakable evil. each one of us. But we also have unlimited potential for good. It really is a choice of us. It comes down to our individual choice and the actions that we make, the choices that we make moment by moment in our lives. It's difficult, and it never ends, not until you're dead. As long as you're alive, the fight continues. The fight to control yourself, the fight to control your will, the fight for your soul. It is never over as long as you're alive. Don't give in. Don't take the easy way out. Don't resort to blind, foolish rage, which in the end usually makes things just worse than they were before. Use reason. Use compassion. Use evidence. There was a wise man who once said, love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. Those words were true then. They're true now. Follow that lesson. That simple lesson will help you to understand each other better. That's how we're going to get somewhere, by listening to one another, talking it out, respecting each other's humanity, and not accepting anything less. And the last thing I'll say is this. Before you try and change the world, focus on changing yourself. It's really hard. It's incredibly hard to do, to change yourself. But it's worth it. And it's sure a lot easier than trying to change everyone else. All right, that's it. That's it for this episode of The Breakdown. I thank you for enjoying. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I thank you for watching my rant, listening to what I have to say. And next episode, we're going to wade into the J.K. Rowling controversy. That's right. Figured I'd dip our toes into the culture wars a little bit more and talk about that. Is J.K. Rowling actually a transgender hater? What do they call her? A transphobe? Is she transphobic? Is that true? Does she hate transgender people? Is she unfairly biased against transgender people? Or is she simply a person with a different opinion, a well-reasoned opinion, that chooses to speak her mind and not change her opinion based on public pressure? Well, I honestly don't know. But I'm going to find out. So tune in next time and we'll get to the bottom of it. Thanks again for watching. Take care.